Hello, folks, and hopefully this is a little bit better. Do I sound a bit better? I'm sorry about the challenge with it. And hey, so I don't know why that happened, but of course that's one of the joys and fun of doing this sort of thing. As you can tell, I actually got a different microphone set up, and as you can tell, it's going swimmingly right this very second. But anyway, so welcome to the Joy of Deving with Bob Hess, and what we're going to be doing today is we're going to go over a couple of different aspects. I'm super excited to get a chance to bring this to you to kind of go over a little bit of sort of what we're planning on doing today and sort of go from there. So let's start with what's on today's stream. So the plans for today, or at least some of the topics that am going to try to go over, uh, going along with some of what we had done previously, is as follows. What we're going to do is we're going to stub a quest. We're going to start building the dungeon shell. When I talk about building a dungeon shell, what it is that there is the geometry which is on the outside of all of our dungeons, which is sort of the barest bone sort of system that we use to bound players into a specific space. And so we're going to actually start that process today because I think that that particular process is interesting and it'll give you a decent insight. I'll also go ahead and bring you into another dungeon which is fully done, which I'm using for a little bit of the basis of what I want to do for some of the shell building and also some of the decoration. One of the other things we're going to do is we're going to add some decorations so you can kind of see a little bit around of of how we go about making something look completely different than just the bare bones of the shell of the dungeon. Let's see. And the last thing is the dungeon quest. I don't know how far I'm going to get into that, but I can kind of show you the basic file. I'll probably do that starting off while I'm showing you the next bit. So, what I went ahead and did was the following. I'll just take it 1 second for it to come up. Let's see. Give me one moment. All right, here we go. So, what I have here is our quest stubber tool. This is something that I pre recorded before this because essentially the idea is that there's a lot of different files that are generated from it. There's a lot of different pieces that are generated from it, and it was going to take a long time with a lot of downtime going on. So let me go ahead and pause that and send it back and kind of go over a little bit of what this tool is and why I'm going to be using it, or like what's the purpose of doing this, and go from there. So when we make a quest or any of our different quests, this is one of our proprietary tools that we use. This is Quest Stubber, um, and what it does is it builds not only the quests that go into the game world, but it also does the connections between the game world from one NPC to another NPC to the actual dungeon and into the dungeon quest. What I'm going to do here, or at least what I'm going to show you real quick, is the following. So what I'm going to start with is by adding a pack, and I essentially just need to do some file naming bits. These file naming bits will essentially give me references as I build the dragon going on, build the dungeon going on, and also give me some additional information for what I'm doing. Right there, what I did is I went ahead and called it Kitty Dragon. The update, so it's the name and the real name, and so Kitty Dragon is sort of our code name for the entire process and for the quest itself. And then going from there, uh, the real name is it's a reference. It's just a file reference name. It'll be Kitty Dragon, Kitty Dragon. It's just something that we've done over the years. It sets it up and sort of sets up what's going on. As we're going through updates, we planned a number of updates ahead of time. Our current plan is to have this released in December. So I believe that at this point that's going to be update 65. That's updatable, that's changeable, that's malleable. But given the information that I've been given by our development team, that's what I'm going with, and that's what we're going to be putting together. Let's see questions that we have here. All right. I'll get to you in a little while, Druid's Fire. All right. Moving on. What I did from there is when I actually accepted that, that made the following three files. It made a pack called Kitty Dragon, an S quest, which is essentially the breadcrumb to the quest. It's an S quest is all of the information and sort of storytelling information from that leads you from the outside world into one of our dungeons. So in specific, this is S Quest Kitty Dragon, and what this will do is this is sort of the wrapper quest for all of the ones that we're going to do. And the NPC, when it subs out, it calls it that. But as you can see, as I go forward, I'm going to go ahead and change that name and change it to the name of one of the two NPCs that we built last time, and which was Kitty Dragon underscore arc. And then what I'm doing here is the next portion of the process, and I'll go back a little bit so that you folks can see that, is add a quest line. Now, what this is just sort of the interior set of tools, and in this specific case, it essentially just adds a quest line, and what it will do is it will give me a vector quest to the actual dungeon. It will give me an NPC, and it will also give me a dungeon quest. The dungeon quest is the actual data that contains all of the information for DM text, where the quest is in our internal tools, and a number of other different bits and pieces, which I'll go into a lot more in the future when I actually get to the dungeon quest portion. So in this particular section, I went ahead and selected add quest line, and then what I did here is named it packs. So essentially, the main file for this entire dungeon, as you can see, is the D quest is Kitty Dragon underscore packs, and that specific right there is one of the main file types. Second, let's see what we got. Hello, folks. By the way, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks so much for being pretty good about dealing with the little bit of an audio flub when we started, but here we go. All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to go ahead and rename that second NPC to the actual one that we decorated last time. I believe the name was Quest Arc or something of that sort. And then what I just need to update these file references so that when I actually generate these files and I make them, they all work in our tools, and I don't have to go back and rework a whole bunch of different stuff. Um, it's super interesting when working in a tool space for different quests and different in this specific case, and even between our two different games, this is a different process than we use going forward. Right there, I made a transition, and one of the reasons why I made the transition is that some of this stuff is a little tougher to read. Hopefully, some of this is readable, but essentially, what we're doing here is we're setting up a whole bunch of properties on the dungeon quest. Um, Essentially, does it have a heroic and an epic version? What's the challenge rating for it? And as we go down further, where is it located? Is it a interior land block or an exterior land block? Essentially, the reason why that matters isn't all that important, but in this particular case, what I'm doing here is setting up coordinates. I will show you in just a few moments what the reason why I'm doing this. I'm going to go ahead and set this up, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and hit blend as soon as I go through. I'm just double checking, making sure that everything is set, and then what we do is I'm going to go ahead and verify to make sure that I didn't make any horrible oopsies, and in this case I didn't, and then I'm going to go ahead and compile it. And what this is going to do is spit out a whole bunch of information about all the different files and all the different things that I had built and sort of pre-built for this. So I kind of wanted to walk you through that because that is a process that could have taken. It sometimes takes 5 minutes. It sometimes takes 20 minutes, and so there you are. All right. So the next thing I'm going to go to is I have switched up how I'm showing you World Builder. I actually switched over to a dedicated screen so that you guys can actually see it a little bit better, and I think that this will work a lot better given sort of the complexities of the panels. So I'm going to start with this, which is our map view. Now, what the map view does is it shows us a lot of different information on the entire game world. We have a series of different regions. This one is called Storm Reach, and this is where all of the land block information for the entire game is sort of stored, and you can also visualize it. So if I wanted to, I could show you this. And so what this is a visualization of every single place in our entire game world which actually has any sort of dungeon or anything. Anything that is a pink little dot is actually a quest. In this particular case, I have selected the region for Kitty Dragon packs where I'm going to be going to, but like all over the place, there are a whole bunch of different ones, and depending on which one we're going on, you can kind of find what you're doing. Also, luckily, much more usefully, sometimes the description isn't great, but we have a list of all of the different places that characters can teleport to or we can teleport in. And here you can see that there's Three Barrel Cove Capstone, things of that sort, uh, and uh, and things of and as we're kind of going through, you can see all sorts of different things. Anything from the airships that we've gone to. I know I'm kind of scrolling through fast, but like I can go to any of the TOEE ones if I wanted to go to a specific place. If I knew that that's uh, where something had happened, or if I wanted to look at Codex Gatekeepers, I could select those. In this particular case, I have selected a couple in my history, which are going to be somewhat relevant to what we're going to be doing. First up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to teleport us to the dungeon that I stubbed out that I showed you that quick video on. The reason why this is somewhat interesting, and it'll just take me a couple of seconds to bring it up, is that, sorry, every single dungeon that we make starts like this, or anything that is in dungeon space. This is literally the basic building blocks of what we use to create any space. There are a couple different pieces to it. This thing here that's glowing right now is called a telepad, and it's used as the object as a reference for when people teleport from place to place. So in this case, if I was to teleport into this area, I would teleport at this location in the middle, and party members essentially get scattered around this location. Um, every stubbed quest that we start off with has a kobold in it. Why does it have a kobold in it? Hold on one second, and I will bring up that information. It's because every single dungeon, this is the dungeon quest itself, starts off setting up as a one quest completion quest that is kill a kobold. If you kill the kobold in this quest, you will complete it. Um, the dungeon has a lot of other information in it. As you can see, it's sort of the name of it. Um, there is some information regarding quest progress, which has to do with communicating with the story quests outside the thing. And then there's stuff like, does it have a heroic difficulty? Does it have an epic difficulty? What is the challenge rating for normal, hard, and elite? What's the challenge rating for epic hard, and epic elite? And we set these specifically. And then, is it a solo or a party instance? At this point, we only make party instances. We don't really do solo content. And then the complexity and length essentially are determined after a lot of that information is built and after the dungeon is built, and that sort of sets the base XP for a dungeon. Um, let's see. Other stuff that's interesting is that it lists a teleport destination. This is the reference that this quest uses that brings you to the telepad that I showed you a little bit before. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it for here. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the other piece. So essentially, a lot of our files are interconnected, and one refers to another thing, which refers to another thing. The information in our world builder, which you're seeing here, essentially is a text file. It's a different type of text file, but it's a text file all the same. If I go ahead and save this and complain for a second, what I can do is over on this show you what this looks like. This is just some basic information above it. And what this is literally the distillation of the information from uh, from the actual from our editor into what it's actually doing in the dungeon itself. So, so the teleport destination, which is the telepad, its location is at this offset, and this is the reference name to it, and all of that information is actually set in a somewhat text readable format, but it's much easier to go ahead and do a lot of this work in the world building. So yeah, that's a little bit about what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to go back and answer a question from Druid's Fire, and then I'm going to kind of launch into actually starting to build the dungeon. Druid's Fire asked, did the other companies that I work for have similar tools, or were the processes and tools wildly different? They had some tools which, when being built, when we used, had the same end goals, but the front ends and what we did to build the specific things are completely different, and very much so. I mean, even making a normal quest from Lotro to Dungeons and Dragons Online is vastly different, because we do a lot more specific work in our actual dungeon quest file, while they have an editor which does a lot of that work and things of that stuff. But it's kind of neat to look at. It's kind of neat to sort of see. When I was working on the other projects I was working on, some of them had completely different tool sets. Some used Lua, some used their own proprietary things. All of the different companies that I've worked for have all used their own proprietary engines, own proprietary tools, with the exception of some with the exception of like source management and stuff like that. But a lot of the actual how you build content or how you built monsters, skills, and abilities, and all of those types of things, vastly, it was different for each way, and the way that that information gets brought to the players was really vastly different. I personally really deeply love this tool set. One of the things that I've always enjoyed about this tool set is that I can do a lot of pretty simple tasks very quickly, because uh, a lot of the connections and things of that sort I can put together in a sort of visual format, and it's a lot of visual scripting, which goes a little bit faster. The question about the engine stuff, I'm sure that we have folks working on that. I don't have any specific details on that. There are folks much smarter than me looking into any of those bits and pieces, but um, I'm going to kind of get back to what we're working on. Let's see. The other question is, do you place telepads directly on the playing ground, or we place them ever so slightly just to make sure that when a player comes in, they sort of fall slightly so they don't get stuck in the floor. If people go too far down, they will get stuck in the floor or fall through the floor and then go into the great nothing, and that's not great. It's not a fun play experience for anybody involved. We see some neat stuff, but it's not the best. One of the other interesting things is when I go through here, currently I do not have some things set up, which I'll set up quickly, or I'll set up in a little bit differently. One of the neat things that we can do is that even though this is in something called dungeon space, we can do stuff like set a skybox so that when we're building dungeons in this particular way, you can kind of see what the rest of the world would look like. So what I'm going to do here is do my first major change to it, and it's just going to take me a couple seconds to bring it up. What I'm doing is selecting uh, one of our sets. A number of things that I know while working here is that we have a wide array of different sets that we work in that have been built over the years by our amazing art teams and things of that stuff. A lot of these are called and are reference names. Some of them don't particularly uh, make sense or would make particular sense. But in this case, what I'm going to do is select one of our straight hallways and replace this. Now, what did that do? If I zoom out, I now have a space with two walls and nothing else. So what do I know about the space that I'm building? I'm going to be trying to build a cityscape. One of the ways that we do build a lot of cityscapes is use these types of specific sets and then kind of go from there. In this particular case, you notice that this has a ceiling to it. Um, so what we're going to do is we're going to, for performance reasons and a couple of other reasons, we're going to switch back and forth between interior sections and exterior sections. Um, Essentially, there's a wide array of different stuff in the level design process. Things like making sure that you don't have hallways for too long because it affects performance. A lot of times we have to sort of set up like turns or places like that. And also, for our larger spaces, we have a certain set of cells which are more flexible but are less performant. And so what we need to do is we need to connect them in different places. Um, the entrance telepad at the end is not going to end up here. It's going to be somewhere else. Let me show you that. Now, one of the cool things about this is um, if I wanted to add another hallway, we do that through a series of commands, and it's essentially a right-click hallway, and it brings up a list of different things that are options that could connect with this specific cell. So in this particular case, if I wanted to make a corner, I could go ahead and set up a turn if I wanted to do that, and I'm going to do that. Now, the portal 1 and portal 0 will essentially be, is it a left turn, is it a right turn? I don't always remember which one it is, so I normally place them in worst comes to worst, I delete it and go back. But so essentially, you can see here that I have made a left turn. And so that's how that is the process here, that we go about creating an extra piece of this specific set. Now, I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff which takes a lot longer and is a lot harder, but you know, it's sort of the process of as you're adding these pieces, you're actually building the 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 like the ways and paths that players will progress as you're going through it. As a dungeon designer, I have to take into account a number of different things like what do we currently have assets for? What is a cityscape or something that's interesting that would work in this particular case? One of the other things I'm going to do real quick while I'm here, I will close that, is second, I will go to properties, go to What I'm going to do is I'm going to set some light levels. And what this will do is bathe the entire dungeon in this set of colors so that players have a basic amount of light before we actually sort of set up any of the specific lights that we do or things of that stuff. But this will just give it a little bit of color and also will pretty drastically change what's going to happen. It's going to be a daylight scene. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'll keep this like this, and then I'll do this one a little bit redder. And when that happens, okay, that blew it out a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and tone it down after that. But essentially, the entire dungeon will now have that specific hue. Here, let me go back. Nope, wrong window, because that's how it goes. And what we do is we change this. I know that this is, there'll be some pieces where let's go a little bit lighter, so it's a little less drastic. And we'll go a little darker so that the rest of it kind of comes together. And we're gonna later on. I'm gonna show you a lot about lighting. I'm gonna do a complete lighting pass on this dungeon, but for when I'm starting off, I'm essentially just trying to set it so that if I was to spawn into this space, I could actually see things. Um, let's see. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna real quick cap the two ends of this. Um, it's a tools thing. Um, Essentially, if I try to save this and there aren't ends on each one, it'll complain a lot and be very angry at me. So I need to make sure that there's some sort of ending to this. So I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick. And essentially, what I have created is a very quick part of a shell of what I'm going to end up using for my dungeon. So, what my next plan is to look at another dungeon which uses a set that I think is pretty essentially as set pieces, and I think it does a really good job of going between exterior and interior dungeons, um, and kind of show you what I'm going to use and take from that, and start actually building this as we go. If you folks have questions, please let me know. I'm down for pretty much any of those. Let's see. Is it possible to add quest givers in the adventure areas with tasks to complete in an adventure area itself? So that's more challenging. One of the things is that our adventure areas, which are sort of an exterior setup, the way that they interact with quests is formatively and profoundly different than how we do things in our dungeon spaces. And so that's more challenging. We can do that sort of thing, but it's not something that we do a whole bunch. For quest designers, currently on our team, I think we have a total of 7 quest designers. We just hired a new one and we brought another one back. And so I think our team is up to 7 people, which are on the content design team. Now those content designers can do anything from uh, writing, like when I get this project, and as a content designer, I'm mostly in charge of the writing, the building, the scripting, the monster placement, any encounters that I want to do. I'm responsible for doing all of that. Does having more? Okay. Yes. So, and each of us do that for the dungeons that we're working for. We do work back and forth. We do have people doing copy editing and a number of other stuff, but it's kind of neat. All right. Next question. Does having more light sources cause performance issues? Some of my favorite quests are quests with more ambient lighting and specific instead of having one set lighting. Now, what I did here was an oversimplification of what we do. We normally only put this for just a little bit, so the darkest dark places are essentially still visible and you can still see things. But I think that one of the things that we can do in lighting is that we can do more atmospheric lighting. However, there are certain types of lights which are or less performant, which are called key lights, which are things that throw shadows and kind of make areas a little bit more cool, uh, like a little more atmospheric. The challenge is that those are less performant, so we have to kind of pick and choose as we go, and also there is a limit to the number of lights we can have per area, um, because that will also it'll also slow down drawing and all of that, or rendering and all of those types of things. In this particular case, there aren't a lot of lights in this set, so I really can't show you it. But we even have tools to go back and look and be like, hey, are there too many lighting sources hitting this specific location or this specific object? Um, have you ever considered giving players access to your assets? So one of the challenges is that we really have we considered it? Of course, it's one of the things that was kind of a big thing for a while, UGC, things of that stuff. But it's not really the way that we build dungeons is not really conducive to a commercial setting or even to a player tool set. The amount of work that we would have to do to get players to the point where they could build things using our tool set would be so much infrastructure and so much building that what we could do to our game compared to that would be much larger. Now, granted, everything could change. There's a huge asterisk on all of that. At some point, someone could come along and be like, "This is what we're going to do." But at this point, I don't see it realistically happening. But it's one of the things that we would love to see. But there are a lot of technical challenges, and there's also a lot of like some challenges for building that and rewarding players for building that type of stuff. And also, there are a lot of other games and a lot of other systems which are sort of built around having that idea and having that concept. And I think that some of those might be better places to do that. All right. So I got kind of sidetracked, but we're going to. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to uh, some of our water does it, some of it's fine. It really depends on the specific assets, and it's one of the things that we're walking down. One of the things I can say is client performance and server performance is something that our engineering team and our art team and everyone involved is actively working on. We know that there's some spaces which aren't perfect, but it's something that we're working as we go along. All right. I've been sidetracked enough at this particular case, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to another one of the dungeons that I built, which is Plague Quarantine. It'll just take a couple of seconds for it to load up. Just give me a few moments while we do so. Now, the reason why, um, the reason why we do a lot of this and essentially uh, why we look at some of the different things is because sometimes in the past we've successfully created or built something on it. Uh, performant means that it performs well enough or is a better practice for us to use as we're going on. Um, I do want to go back and also mention that I'm a content designer. I have knowledge of some of the other different disciplines, of a number of other things that are going on in the game. But this is a content developing stream. I'll answer questions regarding content, building content, how we make choices, and how we do a number of different things with that. But if you have engine questions, I really am not going to answer them. I'm not the person who should do that. I don't. At some point, there might be someone who is doing that sort of stuff, but I'm not the person. If you have questions regarding balance or systems or those types of things, that's not stuff that's going to be covered because that's not the idea or the kind of concept of what we're doing for this specific thing. This this stream itself, the entire idea is to give you a little more of a glimpse into how we actually make content. All right, so we teleport in below where the telepad is. And as we can see, this is what the start of that dungeon looks like. What this dungeon of uh, uh, what the dungeon looks like uh, for this. As you can see, there's a telepad here, and we have a number of different objects. Some of these are things like decals, which kind of show are a way that we can change the actual appearance of a lot of the different stuff. And then we start seeing different pieces. Now, the kind of neat thing looking at this is you can see that we set a daylight sky, and so what this is a series of those specific boxes with a number of other objects which have been placed upon them. In this case, it's st market mod building underscore b entity. I'm going to remember the st underscore market underscore mod underscore building because a lot of the assets that make these walls different are based around that, just because it essentially allows us to set up different pieces. Also, here you'll see a number of different objects which control sort of how the dungeon itself moves and things of that stuff. All right. Who handles mob counts for conquest stuff? Mob placement ourselves is something that dungeon designers themselves do, but there is some work with the systems team when we go back and forth on how many monsters we should play. Also, one thing that people should be aware, what our modern sensibilities and what are the modern decision making that we've had for dungeons is different than what it was in the past. There were decisions made in the past. There are times that we have time to go ahead and revamp some of that content and work on some of that stuff. It would be interesting. Realistically, at no, like I'm, like most of the things when I'm looking at stuff like conquest stuff, it's stuff when we go back into it, we look and we're like, okay, what are the decisions that we have to make? But a lot of the conquest count stuff is stuff on the systems end, and it's an ongoing thing that we're looking as a system. It's something that we're going through. Um, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of these because I think that it will be useful in the near future. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and let's go back over to my other dungeon. All right. Uh, which of my dungeons is the favorite one that I've worked on? I've been asked that a whole bunch, and I have a wide array of answers, and it really changes on the daily. I have a deep fondness for the second. I worked on the second Slavers dungeon, and while that dungeon is long and needs some editing and needs some cutting back, it has a number of really kind of fundamentally fun encounters that I really deeply enjoy, and so I really like that dungeon. One second, sorry. Just be 1 second while I go to nice. Hold on 1 second. Here we are. Are there any Easter eggs the community has never found? I'm uncertain. I'm sure that there's some stuff that some dungeon designers have put in as they were going around, and that we have not seen. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to paste that object. You can see it up here, and essentially I can go ahead and manipulate it and move it around and sort of set it, and how all of those walls and how all of those things are actually made is by partially moving over and kind of covering a section of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build an outdoor section. It's just going to take me a couple seconds while I do it, so that folks can take a look to see sort of what we would go about if we wanted to build this. So one of the concepts that we have is we have a series of pre-built hallway pieces, and then we have a concept of an M room. An M room is a more designable space, which allows us to have some flexibility while we're actually working on, like, while we're trying to shape a space and make it look interesting and independent and different. So a lot of spaces are built in that way. So what am I going to do? I'm going to start with uh, this. The reason why I do this is essentially this allows me to continue the floor pieces. Players have geometry that they can walk on, and now what I can do is actually build a space, depending on where I want sides and walls and things of that stuff. So in this case, what I'm going to do is select. Sorry, it sometimes is a little grumpy. Let's see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a corner. Let's see, base corner, no cap 2. What that allows me to do is have a space where this will break out and move to this direction. I'm actually going to delete this and go here and then go base side, no cap. Yep. Oh, nice. So what this is going to do is allow a hallway to actually push itself out into a larger space. This space here will show any sky that I have over here as long as I change what the visible sky looks like. Hold on one second, and I can show you a example of that. Let's see, where do we put that? Sorry, I'm just trying to remember. Is it dungeon? Cell. Block. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember what specific thing goes. I'd probably normally what I would do is I'll just do that now. Go to dungeon. So a lot of times when you forget when you're actually using the tools, you go back and forth between different things and you see how something is set, and you can grab that. Let's see. Let's see if we have any questions while this is loading. All right. I will go ahead and bring this up. World editor. Okay, it's environment. So back here. What I'm able to do is I'm able to actually copy and paste the setup for that. And so if I was to go to where we went from, I know I'm clicking a lot of stuff, but let me go to that entity. Why is this not being nice? I'm sorry, I'm fighting with the tools a little bit. Takes a little bit while. It's one of the things that happens when you're actually building this stuff. Sometimes things don't always go exactly how you want it to. Let's see. So grumpy. one second while I go back to the other thing. It'll just take me 2 seconds while I do this. So anyway, let's see any other questions that we have while we're working on this. You hate invisible walls and ceilings. Well, one of the things that's going to happen when we actually build these things, we need to have some form of ceiling. Players can have a great deal of traversable ability, but there's a point at which we can't build vertically more. And as such, we don't actually want players to get out of that because it ruins the. It's very immersion breaking. It ruins the illusion of sort of what we've set up and built, and it becomes really, really frustrating. Oh, that's what I'm gonna do. I remember to actually select inside. So when I look at this, you see that that's the sky. What we can do is actually set the sky that we want. This is Harbor No Day, and we have a whole bunch of different ones. If you want to look at what King's Forest looks like, if you just give it a couple seconds, it will slowly actually change into the sky of what King's Forest looks like. If you want to look at what newcomers used as a skybox. Now, these are skyboxes that have been built by some of our designers. You can see that it can go from daytime to nighttime and can really change a lot of how everything looks. And some of these have a lot of information and also can have some objects in the background. If I was to select, I think I did Shav Archon. It might have. Nope. Some of the Shavrath ones might have different objects in the background. This it'll just take a second for it to change. But as you can see, it's one of the ways that we can do distant objects and things of that stuff. So if I wanted to actually set this in Shavrath, that's how we actually did that. Let's see. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select one of the ones that we've been using recently, which will work for this space. In this case, we'll do Harbor Day, No Light, what we started with, because that will give us the appearance of when we actually want the players doing. Now, so a lot of this is making up as I kind of go along and trying to set this up to look like it's a natural part of what we're building. So what I would do here is I would do something like this. I would put this edge of the building. I'll put a doorway which goes here, and essentially it'll be the entrance into this larger area. And I'll keep on building just for a second. The neat thing about our tools is that you can actually always see where you have a connection point and what you can actually connect to. And so it actually makes building this stuff. It's not a quick process, but it's something that you can put together in a decent amount of time to at least rough out and frame what you're going to be doing for a dungeon set. Uh, let's see. Here, this is going to be a quick alley. So this is going to be a smaller exterior space. Let's see. All right, let's see. Do folks have any specific questions about building the content or different objects about that. Um, I'm more than happy to talk about pretty much any of those types of things. So, let's see. That's that. All right. Here, we'll connect the portal. We'll go side, no cap, like that. And we will connect this to a this. Oh, one of the other things we do is we do have pre-generated and pre-decorated hallways. So you can see that some of them have been built, and what we use these for are sort of building blocks as we want to build a dungeon. So the same thing that was used to make the summer castle and the salt marsh, or some of the Copru ruins, or some of the shard stones, I could actually put in here, and you can see that this is a fully decorated cell set with a lot of different pieces and is also pre-lit. So it's kind of neat while we're actually building this in. Is there a submenu in this tool that shows that what you have already used? So uh, what we can do is this is our entity data tree. What it will do is give us information about all the different objects that are in here. In this particular case, if I select cell mesh, these are each checkboxes, which allows us to select each piece that is available. Um, and we can go from there. It's really great for if you want to remove something, if you know that something is sort of problematic, or if you want to go find a specific boss and teleport to them. One of the neat things that we can do is we can actually select one of these things and then go to entity, and we'll actually just teleport there. It's useful for more built spaces and things of that sort, but here we go. All right. So this is a little bit about how we go about doing this type of stuff. Now, one of the things that you can see is that we do have a verticality or ability to put verticality in a bunch of this different stuff. So in this particular case, um, I put a ceiling piece. Take me a second to select it. There. This is a cap, but if I wanted to keep on going up, I could also build this higher so that we can do more vertical space. So here, let's see, we'll do this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just rotating this so it matches the shape of what we want to build. And in this case, if I actually want players to be in a playable space, like essentially players can do things and monsters and all of our things can react when we actually are in a cell space, but things which are capped or are just visual, they're not able to enter. All right, let's see if we have any other questions. Do you have you ever played pen and paper, and if so, any quests you would like to be able to make in DDL? So the answer is yes. I played pen and paper. I've been playing pen and paper since I was 7 years old. I played the red box. I played every single edition since then. Currently playing in a fifth edition campaign. I'm running a fifth edition campaign. Um, and I don't. I'm trying to think of specific dungeons that I would love to see. Part of the challenge is when we as a team have to decide that, hey, I would love to see this. Like, let's say that I would love to see uh, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, or if I would like to see the classic Ravenloft dungeon, not the Curse of Strahd one, but the classic Castle Ravenloft one, or like Against the Giants would be a great one to do. There's a wide different array. What are some of the other ones? There's a bunch of different ones that we played through that have been really, really cool. We keep on looking at those. It's one of the things that we do as we do stuff as a part of our classic packs. We take back one of those dungeons, or we take one of those dungeons from first, second, even third edition, and we sort of rework them. And it's really a lot of fun because a lot of that, what that is translating their vision of what they wanted to build into the DDO space and making it work with our systems and also the challenges and the benefits that we have while we're making this. Like if you look at something like the Slavers group of quests, or Keep on the Borderlands, or things of that stuff. A lot of that stuff is based, or Isle of like a couple of the quests from Isle of Dread are directly from the one of the more recent Isle of Dread stuff. Um, it's taking that information, building a space for it, trying to set up some of the encounters or allude to enough of that encounters, but still making it a Dungeons and Dragons online experience. We want people to see some of the cool encounters that they might remember for when they played it, either recently or different, um, and and stuff like that. Let's see, what else do we have for questions? We have, are the maps automatically generated from space creation, or is that a separate process? It is automatically generated. However, there is some massaging that can be done, and some spaces need additional work to be done. And it's an automated process with some manual interaction and entrance into this. So for each different piece, as you kind of go along and as you sort of kind of set it up, uh, you you have to go back and reference. Like if all of one level you want to change the map on the next level up, there's an entire series of steps that we have to take for each of those maps that we want to. What is my favorite setting, class, and edition? I like. Let's see. That's a great question. Favorite setting. I am a big fan of Planescape. I'm a big fan of Greyhawk, and I'm a big fan of Dragonlance. Probably of all of those, I like Planescape because it gives you a really wide array of ability to do different stuff, but that depends. For addition, that's really a tough call. Um, I love the flexibility of 3 and 3.5. Uh, Given all of the source material that they've put out, it's really neat. I like the tactical aspects of fourth edition, and I think that they did a really good job with that. And I find some of that game playing fun with the group of people which like that type of gameplay. I think fifth edition is a decent blend between the two. Um, Although the higher level stuff is a little is challenging in all of the editions, but it breaks down a little bit as you kind of go along. I have a slight preference for fifth. One of the reasons is the accessibility and the accessibility of tools, the ability and all of the different like third party add-ons and all the different stuff that Wizards themselves has done that allows you to make groups and build groups. All of that stuff is really really helpful. All right, so yeah, that's a little bit about my thoughts on that. So as you can see, as I'm building just this one specific set of uh, area, it takes a little while as we actually put together what would be uh, a city street, even just using some basic building blocks pieces before we really go in and decorate and set up what this is going to look like. I will probably go back and rework some of this as I go. I'm going to be showing you aspects of this, but I kind of wanted to show you the process of when I'm building a dungeon or how I'm building a dungeon. Like these are the thought processes as we start to build this. Now, when I'm building this, I have to think of a number of different things. Amongst them are what are the encounters that I know that I'm going to need to build a space for? What are the spaces, or are there any design challenges or challenging areas I'm going to need to build? Going back to my original concept of this, I know that I need an angled ramp stairway section. I know that I'm going to need it. It's going to be important because I have, in all of the art that we have, I can even go back to 1 second. Uh, you can go back to this. As you can see, there's a big giant ball of string. I mentioned that I want players to go after the ball of string. So I should either do something in which the players are confronted by a large ball of string trying to fall on them. We've done that a couple of different times. It's kind of great. Or the players are pushing it down a hallway and maybe taking out bad guys. I know that that is an encounter. I don't know the shape of that encounter. It's something that I'm going to decide in the intervening times between this this deving, the joy of deving with Bob Hess, and I'll kind of show the process of making that type of encounter. Or at least that's sort of my thought process of what's going on. Now, now that I've showed you a little bit of this, I'm going to hop over back to Plague Quarantine so that you can see sort of all the different bits and pieces as we went along and how we decorated these spaces. I personally like the market set. I think it's good for the style of dungeon that I'm doing. I think that it's good for. I know that this is going to be in one of the different areas in Stormreach. I know that I want to do streets. I know that there's a wide array of different objects for this, um, and and stuff like that. Do any of you make drawings of the dungeon before you do so? Yes, a bunch of us do. It really depends on the person. I do a lot of building as I go along and sort of setting up the shape, thinking of, oh, I know I need to move to this space and this space. So a lot of times I'll build those specific spaces and then kind of work and connect from there. Um, it's quick enough to do some of the work in the tool, at least for the most basic building blocks, that I don't always sketch it down unless it's a very specifically challenging space or if I'm trying to work out a problem and I've been kind of throwing my head into World Builder for that. Now, as you can see, this looks a lot different than that one piece that I had. And what it means is that essentially each of these different pieces, as I'm selecting them, are a wide array of different objects that we have in our library that are sorry that our tools actually or that our artists were kind enough to make. Anything from the scaffolding here, and I can actually go ahead and copy this, place this, look it up by specific area or by specific pack if I know where that's from, and I can go ahead and place stuff from any of this stuff. It's kind of a neat process, and it allows us to do a great deal of different pieces and sort of really customize the space and make each of them using a central set of assets. We can really change how they look, and we can also sometimes get stuff like an APR, which is essentially a way to reskin the same set of geometry with a slightly different look. Let's see. Um, what's the greatest strengths and weaknesses of the dungeon building tool that DDO uses? What was your favorite option in the recent content? Okay, those are some good questions. The strengths of it is that we can prototype and build pretty quickly. We can set up how we want things to look, um, and there's a great deal of flexibility for that. Some of the challenges are it's essentially we don't always have the specific asset that we need, and how can we fake it? How can we make it look close to what we're looking for or what we're trying to do? I'll keep on flying through this so that you can see. And so, how do we go about making the visual representations that we have with the limited or the amount of art that we have, or what can we do in the most budget friendly, convenient, and quick way that we can do? Now, we do make lots of new assets. We make lots of different things, but the flexibility of our existing 16 years of development of objects and things of that allow us to put things together a lot quicker. When we ask our team, which is phenomenal and fantastic at building these things, it takes a great deal of time. So if we can reuse or rebuild or reconceive how we can use something, it just allows us to build in a quicker fashion rather than getting brand new objects for each of the different things. Um, I doubt that the castle in Feywild had a lot of reused components. It had some, but it didn't have a lot. Like, one of the things that's great about doing an expansion is a lot of times we can get larger set pieces or different looks for existing things so that we can really make it feel like the entire dungeon or the entire space has a dramatic shift and isn't something that you've seen. Some of it is completely new assets. We have some great environmental artists. We have some great texture people who do fantastic work and allow us to give us the building blocks and pieces to make all of that stuff. Like anything from Sharn to Ravenloft to all of those different things. We've recently had a great amount of additional art support, which has been fantastic and has allowed us to do all sorts of neat things. Um, so anyway, some of the other things that I wanted to point out while in World Builder is that this is actually a light, and you can see this is the placement for it, and it's actually doing that specific lighting effect on that dropping water. And so that uh, this is kind of a showcase of the same type of idea that what I want to do for the Kitty Dragon dungeon, because what it does is it does a really good job of doing outside spaces. You can see things happening in them, and then it clamps down into these smaller spaces. And depending on what part it is, it's either this more sewer looking piece, or if we go to the other side of the dungeon, you can see that it's a little more open aired or is a little more like sorry is a little more open air like this section here, or is a little more back alley feeling, which is something that I think will work really really well. I also think that this is the type of space that would be really good for, say, having a kitty dragon, maybe drop stuff on players, things of that stuff. And so this sort of interior to exterior, while helping us with some of the engine constraints that we have, it also allows us to sort of do shifts in color, shifts in place, and also uh, a portion of level design is drawing the eye to the next place. How are we moving you, and how are we encouraging you to go to the next space? And also, how are we giving small hints that there might be something a secret here or something of that stuff? Uh, so the gray boxes here are, my guess is this is blocking geometry. So this is something so that players don't jump up onto these specific spaces and get to places where they're not supposed to. This is physics blocking pieces while we're going through. Is the kitty dragon following a string table error? That would be a really, really good inside development pun, but no, not at this point. Uh, but yeah, so yes, so this is a decent look at sort of how we go about building things. You saw me kind of fuddling around as I was building different pieces, but those are all the building blocks of this dungeon. Now, one of the things that I can do real quick is open up filter selected. So what you can see when I select that, and I'm going to go back into another area, is that as you can see that those building block pieces that I was building for the exterior, it's made up of all of these, and these are literally, undo what I just did, but sorry, selected entities, all off. But like if I was to drag this away, you can see that this was the other side of that specific thing. If I was to drag this away, you could see that that's a plain wall. you could see that, and this is sort of how we as a part of our team actually hide the different building block pieces as we go along. Like if I was to take this and drag this back, you can see that that's one different piece. This here is a wall. And what we did is in this specific space, we used a ruddier stone, like alleyway texture on each of the different spaces. All right. So that's a little bit about how we go about. Second, here, save none. All right. So that was a little bit of a look into how we actually go about building the shell of our dungeon. That was a little bit of an idea of what we do when we actually take time and effort and start decorating and building the different pieces. And so each different hallway or each different stuff is put together using either that connection piece that I showed, and then decoration is essentially put on and moved around to set up sort of the set dressing, which makes each of those spaces feel different, feel special, feel a little bit altered or shaped and changed. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm gonna go ahead and show you tonight. Do you folks have any questions before I get going? I figured that last time I didn't do a really great job of, or one of the things that I would have liked to have improved is essentially answering specific questions about what we showed. Do you folks have any questions? All right. I'm going to give it another minute or two, and then I'm going to head out. Um, Folks, I hope this was an interesting look into sort of how we actually do the design of the dungeons, how we actually build the spaces, how we actually do decorations for these pieces, and um, and thanks for sticking with the small audio challenges that I had at the beginning of the show. As always, the joy of deving is something that I'm really passionate about. I'm so glad that we get an opportunity, and Standing Stone Games sort of gave me the opportunity to share how we actually build our content. And I hope you folks have a lovely evening, and I will see you 2 weeks from now. All right, and give me one second.